Welcome to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. I am your host, Emmy DeGrappa. Wyoming is called the Equality State because we were the first to give women the right to vote. 150 years later, we wonder what Wyoming women think about the progress toward equality now. Let's find out, and thank you for listening. Today, we are talking to Cynthia Chace Gray. She is a professional photographer living in Sheridan, Wyoming. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, I am very intrigued that you're a professional photographer, but first I want to ask you, where'd you grow up?
So in a nutshell, I was born in Japan and spent several years there and then moved to Europe. Grew up primarily in Europe, in Belgium and in Switzerland and in Italy, and came to the United States to go to high school. After high school, I went to college in Louisiana, New Orleans, and then moved to New York and was an editor for Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Glamour magazine for several years before I moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, and got married and had kids. And so that's my life in a nutshell, in one sentence. And that's the elevator speech.
There's a lot there, though. Oh my gosh! So, what was your journey to Wyoming?
So about 40 years ago, I came out to Wyoming to a guest ranch and fell in love with the bighorn. Spent a lot of time camping and horseback riding up in the mountains, which I love to do, and just fell in love with it and came out for several years. And then life happened back east, family, kids, work, blah, blah, blah. So didn't have a chance to return. About 12, maybe 14 years ago, a friend of my son's called and said, I'm working at a ranch in Wyoming. You guys have got to come out and visit. So we went out for a week and stayed for a month. And then I took my kids back east, got them back in school, came out for a weekend, went up in the mountains for about 4 days and decided I was still in love with the Bighorn Mountains. And so I needed to find a place here and looked and found a wonderful old ranch that had been built in the 1800s of limestone, which was carved out of the Missouri River, and bought it and spent 2 years renovating, rebuilding the entire ranch, and settled there and had my daughter, who graduated from high school, brought her out, and my son was in college. So, I left New York and Connecticut and Florida and moved to Wyoming.
And what do you find intriguing about Wyoming?
So one of the things about Wyoming, that really speaks to me is sort of this thin veil. Years ago, someone mentioned to me, said, the thinnest veil is the place on earth that we are the most connected to the divine. And for me, it's the Bighorn Mountains. It's Wyoming. Wyoming to me but maybe demands a certain vulnerability from us as people, right? When you're really vulnerable, whether it's in a relationship with another person or with something, you open up your heart, you open up your space and allow that to come in. And Wyoming really demands that. And as you become more open to Wyoming, to the vastness of open space and to the different seasons that are here, people that are here, you just your heart opens up more to it and you see more of it. You see all of it has to offer to you. Incredible beauty that Wyoming has. So that really spoke to me here. It was this vastness of land and sky and incredible, incredible beauty. So and the thinnest veil, again, sort of the place that I feel the most connected for me to that divine that's out there.
I really like that. I haven't heard that description before, so that's very unique. Tell me about your work, Cynthia. You're a professional photographer, and what kind of photography do you do?
So most of my photography is landscape photography. Ironically, Wyoming, large landscape. That's predominantly what I do. This book that I'm doing is about sacred spaces and sacred places. I've had the great opportunity to travel all over the world and experience different cultures and have seen and try and capture the essence of the divine wherever I go, whether it's people in prayer or it's a landscape or it's whatever that is. That's kind of my photography. I'm not not a wedding photographer. That's a certain type of person. I'm not a portrait photographer, but I try and just capture the essence of the moment. I think Claude Monet had a great quote. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I can certainly look it up and send it to you or whatever. But it's about capturing, the artist captures that particular moment. And that's what I do. I see it and I'm able to capture that. Years ago, when I was working in New York, a friend of mine told me, he said, you see things differently than most people. I was like, really? And she said, yeah. And I was like, it's taken me a long time to figure that out, but I kind of do see things a little bit differently. And maybe it's because I've had this vast experience living all over the world and experiencing different cultures and speaking different languages that has given me a richer tapestry, right, to work with. I'll give it an anecdote. I took a class at ICP in New York one year, and there were about 8 of us in the class. Our teacher said, go outside, photograph this fountain at Grant Park, come back in. You'd think everybody's picture would be the same, right? Not one picture was the same. So I realized that none of us see everything through the same lens. We all see life through our own personal lens, whatever that is. So that personal lens is our life experience that we put on, whether it's a movie or it's a situation, whatever it is. It's all of our life experience that we bring to the table every day, whether we're conscious of that or not. And we see things differently. You'll look at something and you'll see something, and I will see something different in that because of my life experience is different from your life experience. This is where I'm rambling. This is where the editing is going to have to come in.
Oh my gosh. You're doing great. I think you have an interesting story. I'm curious about how you became an editor and how at, what did you say, Vogue?
Yeah, I started as an assistant editor at Vogue and worked there for a couple of years. And then I was promoted to editor at Glamour magazine. And then I was an editor there for a few years. And then I got hired by Harper's Bazaar magazine to be an editor there. So I had the great opportunity to work with some extraordinary editors, people like Polly Mellon and Vera Wang and other people like that, and to work with extraordinary photographers, Irving Penn and Avedon and some of the other great, Patrick Demarchelier and some of the great photographers. So that was a great experience for me to be able to be part of that world and work with fantastic designers and create stories and create looks and things like that. So it was a very interesting time, and New York was buzzing like it always is. And I had the great opportunity, as I said, to work with extraordinary people that taught me so much. So that was a fantastic experience for me.
Who has inspired your life work?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest with you. I love different photographers. I mean, people always go back to the traditional things like Ansel Adams. We love Ansel Adams. And a friend of mine, actually someone who I've traveled with a lot on different expeditions, Chris Rayner, is amazing photographer. And he was actually Ansel's assistant for many years at the end. But I don't know, I see different things in different artists. And I won't say there's one in particular. I think as artists, we take from life what we see, and we're inspired by other great work, but not necessarily to mimic it. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's very true.
But to create our own, right? To create our own space and what we see. And living in Wyoming and being here, you just walk out your door, you take pictures. I mean, it's an extraordinary place to be. It's like a smorgasbord every day. It's like, oh my God, this is incredible. Everything from the people to the landscapes to all of it. It's an incredible place to photograph.
Well, as you know, right now we're celebrating Wyoming being the first state to give women the right to vote. And so yes. I want to hear some of your perspectives, now that you've lived here. How many years have you lived here?
I have lived here, I think it's been 12 or 13 years now, full time.
Okay.
Which is like nothing in Wyoming. I mean, it doesn't count unless you've lived here for 4 generations, but, we're trying.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Do you feel like an outsider or an insider?
I feel like an insider now, and The reason why is when I first moved to Wyoming, I had the incredible opportunity to join Leadership Wyoming. I don't know who proposed me, but I was eternally grateful to that person. Being involved with Leadership Wyoming from the very beginning was a fantastic experience. I met some amazing, amazing people in Leadership Wyoming that have become dear friends, and I truly appreciate that experience. It was really extraordinary, and it continues to be extraordinary. That coalition of people throughout the state is just, it never ceases to amaze me, the capacity that institution has. So that was fantastic from the beginning for me. And then I got the opportunity to join the board of the Wyoming Community Foundation, and had the opportunity to serve on that board for about 6 years, which was really an incredible experience. Again, meeting, amazing leaders and people in the state of Wyoming, and really understanding how Wyoming functions, being able, through leadership, being able to travel around to all the different counties and meet different people, the leaders in each county, and then in the Wyoming Community Foundation to look at Wyoming from a philanthropic standpoint of the amazing, amazing generosity that's in the state of Wyoming, and the support that Wyoming, I always say Wyoming's like this. So let's say you're living in Wyoming and everyone's kind of bickering and fighting. You've got different towns. We don't like each other, whatever. And it kind of goes back to school. You have teams, they compete against each other, and that kind of stays and whatever. And Wyoming's very siloed and very territorial. It's just kind of the way it functions, right? But Wyoming people are exceptionally proud people of who they are as Wyomingites. And if you travel and you're in an airport and you see someone with a Wyoming hat on, you're like, hey, Wyoming. Inevitably, you have someone in common that you know. It's like a family where we can all, bicker amongst ourselves, but don't you dare criticize us. Right?
Oh, that's
so that's kind of how I see Wyoming. It's like we're this big family. I mean, when I lived in Buffalo and wherever I live, it's sort of everybody's willing to help. Your mailbox blows down and somehow it resurrects itself. The neighbors just come and do it. And that's the way Wyoming is. Wyoming people are very independent. They're very thoughtful. They're very proud and fierce, right? Because we have to deal with these extreme weather conditions, especially the wintertime, and incredibly supportive. And it's like a big, giant family. And everybody, I always tell people, I say, one thing I got to understand about Wyoming, everybody knows everybody, right? It's not a state where it's like you have to go through 100 layers to find another person. Like pretty much everybody knows everybody here, at least if not directly by one person removed, right?
There's only 600,000 of us, so that...
Exactly. And then you remove the small children and whatever, and it gets to pretty small numbers. And I've met some extraordinary people and have made some wonderful, wonderful friends here in Wyoming. And I love the state of Wyoming. I'm fiercely proud of it. And, work very, very hard to see it be successful in whatever, it's going through tough times right now. And we all pull together. If we all pull together, as we all pull together, we pull through. So, and I think that's incredibly important for us.
Yep, I do too. And I think that, as I want to go back to what I was talking about, Wyoming giving women the right to vote, the first state to give women the right to vote. And there are many reasons for that. But as we are celebrating and commemorating women's equality, how do you picture Wyoming as a woman living in Wyoming? And what do you think we've done right? And what work do we have to do?
Well, that's a huge question. So many layers here to unpack. I think the tradition of Wyoming and the women I have met in Wyoming, from women who drive massive combines and coal mines, who are ranching 24/7, 365, who are, raising families. Wyoming women are really strong women. What I'd love to see is more women in Wyoming coming forward and having the opportunity to serve in the legislature. I think the legislature is not a little bit, it is disproportionately men. I think we could do a lot better there. and have more representation across the board in the equality state. I think that the work that the Wyoming Women's Foundation is doing is really opening a lot of people's eyes to the disparity of paychecks, right? And I think that's a very important thing to address. Again, you said it earlier, we're only 500,000 people in this state. Everybody needs to pull together and work together, not to isolate a group of people because they can't afford it or they can't do it or they don't have childcare or they have to balance 3 jobs at the same time or whatever it is. We all need to come together. And women in Wyoming are a big part of the backbone, right? So are the men, but we all work together to make a better state. And to exclude a group of people because for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like it becomes the equality state. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm wondering, do you have opportunities to work with other women or even mentor young women?
I do. And I enjoy that role very much of working with women, of mentoring women, of encouraging women to step up, of encouraging women. You might have to edit all this out, but encouraging women, I think, to be, and Shannon and I have spoken about this, to be a little bit tougher, especially some women who want to run for office and just women in general, to stand up a little bit harder. I feel like we've kind of gone back to the 1950s for women in Wyoming, sort of the Ozzie and Harriet type of thing, while we overlook the women who are working incredibly hard. We've allowed a sector of Wyoming to kind of dictate behavior. And it's like, well, that doesn't work. This
Right.
is the 21st century, for God's sakes,
Right.
Let's move into that. Let's not go backwards here. Let's move forward. And how do we encourage that? How do we encourage young women and older women, all women, to say yes, to run for politics, to be able to stand up to the rigors of politics, especially today, where it seems to have gotten pretty ugly. Let's not have to do that. Let's not have to do that in Wyoming. I mean, why are we attacking each other at the throat in Wyoming when we don't need to? When we actually should be embracing each other and saying, okay, let's help each other get through this. Let's help each other get better, be a strong state, more equality state. We could do that. But for some reason, it's sort of gone sideways a little bit. I think it's also maybe, I was talking to someone yesterday, maybe it's about a little bit of assertiveness training. It's women, teaching women to say, look, it's okay for you to be called a bad word. It's okay for you to be whatever. If you're going to compete in that arena with guys, you need to be tough. And this is how you toughen up to do it. I think that's important. And I don't know that in mentoring women, we've done enough of that. I think we've given them a lot of tools, but I don't know if we've given them the tool to stand up to say, how do you push back in a polite, respectful way, but in a no uncertain terms way.
Right.
I think women are kind of, you have to behave within a certain role. And I don't think we necessarily need to behave within a role at all. I think we just are human beings. And we need to look at it as human beings.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on that. And it seems like there's some really great women's organizations across the state.
Yes.
And it'd be nice
are.
if we brought all those organizations together and had conversations together about women's roles and what we need to do to lift up and encourage young women to think about office, to think about how they navigate in politics as a mother, because, that's a big barrier, for a lot of women. Once you start taking care of your kids, that's what you're doing. And it's hard to drive all the way to Cheyenne.
Yes, it is. Women are also incredibly capable of doing that. That's the thing. It's just because you have kids or you're a single parent does not disqualify you from any of those roles. And I think people need to hear that message. They need to understand, yes, you can do this. And yes, it's possible. And yes, we're going to create an environment where we're going to help do that. I think that's very important. And we have the capacity. Again, I go back to, I never want to see it to be us versus them in any way. And I think when we start phrasing ourselves that way, it creates this division that's really awful. And we need to be, to me, it's sort of, we're all in this together. Men and women, we are all in this together. And we need to work together to make a stronger and better and more viable Wyoming. How do we get there? By just what you were saying, Emmy. We have groups get together and really drill down into the practicalities of the issues.
That's right. That's really good. Well, it was great talking to you today. I really appreciate your time, Cynthia. And
oh, you're so welcome. No other questions? God, I was prepared for all these things.
You're so funny. Like, we're going to be on the phone for an hour. No. I just wanted really for people to get to know you. And that's the whole point of First But Last, is that we hear lots of different voices and stories from women all across Wyoming. So it's been such a pleasure.
Yes. Let me ask you a question. What do you hear as, let's say, the top 3 prevailing stories? I mean, when you synthesize these stories together, what are the top 3 concerns, or what are the top 3 things that you hear?
Well, when it comes to women running for office, and the barriers have been really interesting because we live in this big state. We have hard winters. And the legislature meets in the winter, and women are caretakers. They are the nurturing person in their family for their children, their parents.
Sure.
So that becomes a barrier in terms of when women can run for politics, and when they can run for office, and when they can serve in different capacities. And I think Clarion Law, I had a great conversation with her, and she said it really took a lot of family sacrifice for her to be the legislator. But at the same time, they make a huge difference, because that's the other thing that people talk about, is that we need a woman's voice. We need her perspective. We need that, because we're different. And so the other thing that really came up. But yeah, so anyway, Cynthia, I really appreciate your time.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead.
So maybe with all this, when this is all your interviews are done or halfway through, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can look at what are the obstacles. So when I hear that the meetings are in winter, why could we not change that to summertime? Everyone's in Wyoming in the summertime. Hunting season hasn't started for whoever hunts and whatever, and more family members around. The kids are not in school, so chances are they maybe can do camp, or they can do some other things and it's easier to kind of organize them in the summertime. The roads are much easier to go back and forth on. You can actually go to Cheyenne and drive back the same day in certain places in Wyoming.
Right.
Why not change it to summertime so we can accommodate more women in the legislature? So maybe it's identifying specific things, like 3 specific things that we can ask and push on, and maybe demand, stomp our little, Manolo Blahnik shoes on the desk and push back to say, we need more women in legislature. We know that. That's important because women have a very distinct voice. These are the things that's going to have to happen for us to be part of this. And we want you guys to be part of this conversation. We want to have this conversation with you, but this is how to include us in. This is how we need to have some movement here. And I don't know if that subject's ever been brought up to them.
I don't either, but I want you to make a note of that. And we'll come back around to that after I have the opportunity to.
Yeah, and then maybe it's in the summertime. If we could do it in the summer, maybe there's a camp. All the kids that are children of legislators can go to camp somewhere that the state pays for, the communities pay for, whatever, and they're looked after for a period of a week or 2 weeks. They have summer camp for, so there are different ways. I was talking to Mandy Fable about this. I said, so much of people look at a cliff or something, go, oh, no, can't do that. There's a wall there. It's like, well, how do we get over that wall? What's on the other side of that wall? So many times we come up against, well, they said no. And I was like, that's just a response. Just because someone says no doesn't mean that there's not another answer there. How do we get them to say yes? How do we move that? And I think if we as women in Wyoming can look at that and go, okay, how do we move this around? How do we change that? So these are our obstacles. How do we change those obstacles? To me, we're looking at that through a different lens. I go back to this life lens. Let's change the lens. See what it looks like, I don't know, in a different lens. See where the other answers are and go, well, this might be an answer here, and let's push on this.
Well, when you mentioned lens, that reminded me that I want to give us your website where we can look at your photography.
Mm-hmm. It's CynthiaChaceGray.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks, Cynthia, and I just hope you have a beautiful day. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. Please join us again next week as we continue our conversations with women from around the state. You can also find us at thinkwy.org, where we continue the conversation on our blog about the history, journey, and the challenges of Wyoming's intrepid women living in the Equality State. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.